It's time for the show that comes at you hotter than a 90-mile-per-hour fastball. Welcome to Blazzzin Sportscast, your source for all things sports news, fantasy football, and trading cards. Now, here are your hosts, Mike Blazzzin Belliot and the Bearded Grinch.
What up, what up, what up? We have our second in a row. We are fully back at it. This is consistency, Chris. 2 in a row, right? It makes it consistent.
2 in a row. I'm loving it. And it is, you hear that song, Most Wonderful Time of the Year. Most people think Christmas. I think football season in full swing. First full week preseason games. Can't be more excited. So this is my favorite time of the year. My wife cringes a little bit because she knows my Thursdays, Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays are pretty much chock full of football, but I'm loving it.
Yeah, we had taken the kids out yesterday, and while we were out walking around, I had said to them, all right, guys, next week is this, the following week is this, and then, of things we're doing. And then right after that, I was like, and then after that, I go, hey, and my kids go, let's go, Buffalo. And my wife goes, oh, God, is it really already? So, she's the same way, and now my boys are getting into it, kind of a little bit. They're excited. So, the wives hate it, though, don't they?
Fortunately, my wife, she'll watch Ravens football. So that's about the only thing. The rest of it, she could kind of care less about. But she'll get into the Ravens game a little bit. Now, will she get as intense as I do and wear a hole in the carpet, pacing back and forth and throwing things at the TV? Maybe not. But she can at least come along for that ride. And we do the direct TV service, so we get every Ravens game at home because I couldn't watch it at a bar with other people around. I would just get so annoyed. So I'm dead set, dialed in and focused. I do kind of like watching all the other games too. I like even bye weeks when the Ravens don't play and I can just kind of decompress a little bit and just enjoy football for what it is and not feel like my life is on the line for every game. So
I think we may have to get some callers in here when we get closer to the season, or maybe even during a game day, to hear their rituals or what their game day experience looks and sounds like. Because I'm very similar to you. It sounds like my wife will come out sometimes and stare at me and be like, "Are you all right?" I'm like a mouth breather to begin with, but she'll hear me huffing and puffing out there and so she actually has been concerned about me during games. But now that the Bills are a little bit better, like the last year, she wasn't as concerned. So
that's funny. Well, we've got an awesome show today with football season coming upon us. We've got the beginning of fantasy football. So we're going to dive into a little bit of fantasy 101, maybe redundant for those of you that are really seasoned in the fantasy, but we just wanted to give kind of an overview and talk through, what the process is like, give you some of the terminology that you're going to hear if you decide to join a league, maybe for the first time, and really trying to decipher what is the best league for you. But before we get into that, big news in the card world over the weekend here. National Treasures dropped, huge product. That's your rookie chase. You're finding those logo man, but you're also finding duplicate autographs. What's the news on that? What are you hearing about Lamelo Ball?
Well, there's a lot of people thinking that Lamelo Ball's signature looks a lot like Miles Bridges. And I've looked at the card comparisons. They really do. I mean, even to the point where the height of the M, and Lamelo obviously being Melo Ball signature, not LaMelo Ball. If he would sign it LaMelo Ball and take his time, we wouldn't have this issue. But he's going off of Melo Ball, which is Miles Bridges, a teammate, correct?
Correct.
And so there's a lot of speculation that he just have him sign it. It was already getting to this point because Melo Ball was giving Panini a hard time about getting his signatures in. So he's like, it sounded like he was like, these are on cards, so F it, I'll get them in. And now it's like, did he really even do it? Or was he just satisfying their demands?
Yeah, I've seen a lot about it. Apparently his dad is the one that's really pushing him not to sign. I guess there's talk about not being, paid enough money for his autograph, things of that nature. I have seen some people that have posted on various forums, Instagram, Facebook, where they've actually shown in-person autographs that Melo has done, and it does look like the MB. So maybe it is legit. I think there's going to be more to come with it. I also saw one, being a Ravens fan, I can kind of speak to this because I went through mine and kind of looked at it. Marquise Brown, he does an MB, and it looks really similar to Bridges and Melo Ball. So, curious to see how it shakes out, but this isn't going to be the first time. I know we were talking before we went live about, a couple other instances where there's been some controversy. So definitely not the first time we're seeing this.
No, I just found out this weekend that Dak Prescott didn't sign his own signatures from the start. He had someone, and that Luke, I had heard this before. I didn't realize it was Luca's mom that had signed Lulu on some of his stuff. So yeah, it's interesting, and I to a point, I surprised there aren't more checks and balances. I was talking to a friend about this week when we talked about this whole autograph thing. I said, even if Panini or Topps or whoever can't send a representative, it's not hard to send a video capture device and be like, we need you to like set this up with the tripod. We need to see you have evidence of it in case there's any, because they guarantee on the back of the card, they guarantee that authentic autograph. So therefore, it's a legally binding contract essentially with the card purchaser that this is going to be that. To me, it just doesn't seem like it's worth the risk to not tell someone, hey, can you just pop this like camera on real quick so we can have evidence that you signed?
Yeah, imagine if you're that guy that, hits the true RPA and sells it on eBay for 75 grand. That buyer then finds out that it's not a true autograph. Is Panini going to be on the hook for that? So curious to see where that kind of falls in the long list of lawsuits against Panini if something should come out to that. But just something to keep an eye on. Really interesting. Kind of had the card world buzzing for a bit. The other thing is we were talking about preseason football, and the big news is this is the first week where teams put out their depth chart, and it's a chance for fans to casually be able to look, see where their players are matching up, lining up, what their thoughts are. Interesting thing out of the Texans camp, Deshaun Watson, number 4 on the QB list. What does that spell for him and his future there in Houston?
I mean, I don't get it. At first, the news had dropped that he was released, which really confused me the next day when I went to look it up, and it said he's now 4th string. Maybe they just didn't want to get rid of him. Did they get news that we haven't gotten yet? What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know he's not traveling with the team for this week's game. So there in itself, he's not going to be starting. So maybe this is just what they put out there for week 1 of the preseason. So in which case, if he's not traveling with the team, obviously he's going to be, 4th in line based off of that. So I'm not going to read too much into it. The problem is we see a lot of these fake Instagram and, Twitter accounts where people are putting fake news out there to try to get hits and, try to gain followers. And so you see fake news constantly being put out there. So it's not just the political world. We're seeing it in the sports world now, and that thing about him being released was put out there and to this point has been unverified. So, I don't think anyone really knows what's going on except for them behind the scenes. I think from what I've heard from quote unquote reliable sources, the Adam Schefters of the world, is that Houston's still not willing to deal him or willing to trade him. So it doesn't look like anything's happening there. I don't know if it's just a play where they're waiting to see what happens with these, potential lawsuits and if there's any, civil or criminal things that come about this before they make a move. But it's just something to keep an eye on. And what's really interesting is you've got a high profile player like that on a lot of fantasy boards, and this leads us into our discussion for today, would be projected to go, maybe top 10 quarterback. It's going to affect the way that fantasy football advocates go, through their draft. And so we'll touch on that a little bit more when we start getting into the drafting, but let's just dive into this fantasy football. I know this is something near and dear to you. You're a huge fan of it. Talk a little bit about your experiences and what got you into fantasy football.
Well, I've been doing fantasy football since I was about, I think, in 6th grade. Where our 6th grade was a part of the middle school. And that was back when my mom would take me for breakfast in the mornings before school. And I was in charge of doing the scoring for all 12 teams, no internet during that time. So I would get the sports page and sit at this little diner while we ate breakfast before school and tally up everyone's scores out of the paper. And, back then there was none of this extra scoring. It was 6 points for a touchdown. And if they got 100 yards, you got an additional 6 points, which was old school standard scoring. So it was awesome. And then the way we did pickups or waivers was it was the first one to go to our one teacher that was in charge of the league, because we would draft it in a classroom after school, and we would have to run to him. Like there would be a mad dash when we got into the building, and we'd get there, and I'll never forget. He'd be like, I already picked up that guy. So there was no method or to the madness. It was just a free for all, and we still loved it. We did that all through high school. It got a little bit more intense and organized. But I've been doing more leagues like that. I'm in an average of like between 12 to 20 leagues every year. About 5 of those are always live drafts, which means I go to the location. When I say live drafts, like in-person drafts, with a variety of leagues. And they're by far my favorite. Rather, it's the ones where you actually go up and put the sticker on the board, which if you're not in one of those leagues, get a bunch of friends. There's nothing better than a cookout or everyone brings a dish and you sit out front and drink beer and put stickers on a board and give each other hell for your picks. And then I'm also, my other favorite is an actual live, and we'll get into these later in a little bit, but a live auction draft where we all sit around a table. We get a whole room at a restaurant, our own private room. And we hit with our pens up. If your pen's up, you're still in the bid. And we go around the circle and we bid on it. When you pull players out of a hat, there's different styles of way you do this. But, man, I'll tell you what, that is the most intense draft auction league I've ever been a part of. So in-person leagues are by far the best. If you can get a group of friends, it's harder and harder as people move away to do that. And thank God for technology and the internet that we can, have all these leagues online. But, man, if you can be a part of an in-person draft, if you have to do the grunt work and get a league together, I encourage you to start it right now and try to get it done this year, because nothing beats a live in-person draft.
That's wild, because I know you, and I know with your tendency for some ADD, having that many teams, I don't know how you manage and keep up with that. It's like a full-time job in itself. But I'm with you. I started fantasy football back with my high school football team. We would all get together and have a draft, and it was the old school draft. I think at that time there's probably only one platform, if anything, that you could use to kind of track and monitor things. But, as we kind of dive into this, I think you mentioned something really important. You used the word commitment. So when we talk about fantasy football as a whole, that's the first thing that you have to decide. If you're going to be a player of fantasy football, you need to determine what your level of commitment is going to be. And what's great is that there's varying types of fantasy football games that you can be a part of that are going to cater towards the level and the amount of commitment that you have. So let's kind of break down a little bit for the listeners about the differing types. You've got casual fans that, maybe can't commit to a season long, run organization where, you've got a league that's going all season long. And so they do offer now through places like DraftKings, these daily fantasy games where, you can go week by week and you can choose a team and play it each week. Versus those that are more seasonal, which obviously that's going to entail the entire season, and then more long terms where you talk about those keeper leagues and dynasties. So I know you do a lot with the daily fantasy stuff. So explain a little bit about what is a daily fantasy league.
So for those of you who haven't ever done daily is essentially that for whatever stretch of games you want to do it. It could be the Thursday through Monday games, or you could just do it for the 1:00 Sunday games. You could do it for the 4:00 Sunday games. You could do it for the Sunday night Monday games, but it's all based around that 1 week of football. So week one, DraftKings or FanDuel will put out a slot of games or a stack of games, and then you can pick which slot you want depending on essentially the game menu. And then you get a salary cap. Each site does a different amount, but let's just say hypothetically $50,000. And then based on that salary, you can pick your team. Quarterback's generally the most expensive spots. So you can choose how you want to spend that money. The best part about daily fantasy is you don't have to worry really about injuries unless it's just that week. So, if they get injured that week, all right, that week might be a wash for you. But you can kind of assemble your own lineup. You don't have to worry about someone stealing your player. If you really, really, really want Dak Prescott as your quarterback that week, you got him. You're just going to have to figure out how to fit all your other guys in there. So the cool thing also about it is you can go up against, 50,000 people in one of the bigger tournaments, or you can go head to head against one other person, or you can get in a league of 10 or 20 guys. And they fill very fast. So if you wake up Sunday morning, you're like, shoot, man, I really am excited about this week's game. You can hop on DraftKings or FanDuel or some of the other sites as well, and just put in that fantasy stuff for the day. If you're feeling a week and you really feel like a stack of players that's going to do really well, hop on there and you can throw anywhere from $1. I mean, they can go down, I think, below that, but $1 all the way up to $500, $5,000 and put a team in. So it can get really intense. There's people that do this as a profession. So it's kind of nuts. It's a lot of competition though, because you're going up against some sharks in there. So you have to be careful. Like you can think you know it all until you play in one of those daily leagues.
Yeah, pretty cool. So you're going to have a financial commitment there, but to your point, can be as low as 50 cents to $1 on up. So do your research, find out what you want. There are payouts at the end if you finish in the top, with 10, 20%, however it's worked out based on whichever platform you decide to use. But to your point, again, this is something you can do just on a one day. You can choose, a slate of games just for the 1:00 on Sunday. You can do Thursday through Sunday, but it gives you an opportunity just to kind of get your feet wet. And it's not something that you have to continually come back to every week unless you choose to.
Well, and then the other option is, too, that a lot of people don't realize this, is you can get into a best ball league as well, which is the same kind of commitment. You just have to commit yourself to a very short time. I'm in a bunch of these. So it's the difference is that it lasts year long, but you just draft once, and then they call it set it and forget it, because essentially you draft a full roster. There are no pickups for this team. You keep all year long. The roster's generally a little bit deeper. It's beyond the starting lineup. So you have to make sure if you do a best ball league that you're thinking through injuries and handcuff players, meaning that if you draft someone like Christian McCaffrey, you're going to probably want to draft Chuba Hubbard, because you're going to want to make sure if Christian McCaffrey goes down, there's no waiver pickups. So you're stuck with that roster. You lose a full roster spot. The nice thing about that is for people who have busy schedules, families, a lot of commitments, you can actually enjoy your team all year long without having to worry about setting your lineup. And what they do is they take your best players every week. So you don't worry. It doesn't take all your players. So whoever your top 2 running backs, your top 3 wide receivers, your best tight end, your best quarterback, and they generally don't do kickers and defenses. So you don't have to worry about that. I know a lot of people hate that in fantasy. So if you're looking to get into some leagues, Yahoo does this. Watchdog does this. Watchdog's a newer site that does an app that does a lot of best ball. But I've been in a bunch of $1 leagues. I probably have $21 teams, because I don't count those in my fantasy teams. I never have to look at them again. Right. I'll do those, honestly, while laying in bed at night. I'll draft a team, and then throughout the season, I might click on that best ball app from Yahoo, that best ball link, and get to check all my teams and see how great my projections were going through it. And it's for me, it's a fun way to do mock drafting with a little bit of stake in it. A lot of people do these, what we call mock drafts, these practice drafts. They're fun, but people just get in there, they log in, they log out, and it's not really a mock draft, because players get selected that would not normally get selected. They'll take kickers in the 3rd round just to mess up the mock draft.
Right.
People have money invested into it, so they're a little less likely to just blow the mock draft. So that's another thing you can do to be committed to it without being committed every week all season long.
Yeah, that's a good option. To your point, you could put your phone away and not look at it all year, and then the end of the season, open it up and found out that you won some cash and you didn't have to touch a button. So that's pretty good. Now, if you're not wanting to kind of dip your toe in a little bit farther and get a little bit more commitment, you want to look at something more of a seasonal commitment. There are seasonal drafts, and these are really found in the form of like a redraft league. So what a redraft league is you basically start fresh each year with a new draft. So you join it, whether it's one that is the same guys you come back to every year, where there's a commissioner and you run the same league every year, or if you just want to join a random league on an ESPN or a Yahoo or any of these applications that provide fantasy football, you can join with, to your point, people from all over the world. And what you do is each year it starts over. So you start fresh. They have a draft, and you will draft your players for that team. The end of the season, that team's dead and gone. Then you start fresh over the new year. So this is a way for guys that want to just kind of get into it, but don't have the commitment to where I don't know if this is going to be something I want to get into long term. You can kind of start there on the redraft leagues, and it gives you an opportunity to get your feet wet with fantasy that way.
And that would be the best way to start, especially if you're a new player, you're new to fantasy, because then if you commit yourself to any other style of league, whether it be keeper, dynasty, something like that, it can be very frustrating to start off with a bad team. So if it's your first time, find a redraft league. They're everywhere. There are a plethora of sites you can do. Or if, like I said earlier, you're going to start a cool league in person, redraft's the best way to go until you find people like Chris said that are truly committed, because you might have to scrape some guys around to get a live draft around. That's okay. Have them do a redraft. It's a lot of fun. It's really easy to put together. And guess what? If you sucked at your draft, just be committed that year. Right. I would say that's the one recommendation. If you get in a league, set your lineup every week. It takes 5 minutes. Don't let inactive players on your starting lineup, because that can really mess up other people. If they really need someone else to win for them to get in the playoffs, and they're playing you, and they need you to win to get into the playoffs, but you don't even set your lineup, it can be very frustrating to have someone like that in the league. So if you commit to it, even if it's $5 for the league, just be respectful enough to stick your starting lineup out every week.
Great point. Now, the last two types, now these are really, when we talk about commitment, these are a longer-term commitment, and this is where you really want to do your homework. You want to make sure that the group that you're getting involved with are those individuals that are willing to come back year in and year out. To your point, great opportunity to get a really good group of your friends together. When you have these leagues that last, longer than one season, it's a great chance for ribbing. You guys get to, mess around with each other, pick on each other for, poor performances, things of that nature. You get a lot of things going with trading on and off, but those are found really in the form of two things. One is a keeper league. And for those who aren't familiar with that, in a keeper league, you typically retain, and it depends on the rules set by the league, but between 2 and 4 players from your roster each year. So you will keep those same 2 to 4 players each year. And what that really does is it focuses not only on superstars that you may want to keep or retain, but also identifying breakout talent. So can you be ahead of the curve? Can you be that scout that identifies someone who may be a future star, and that's an individual that you retain? So that's considered a keeper league. And then the second is a dynasty league, and that is where you retain your entire lineup. Once you draft, you keep your lineup for good. The only way that you can add players is through dropping them or trading them. So you've got keeper leagues and dynasty leagues. What kind of experience do you have on either of those, Mike?
I mean, they're my favorite because I feel like you have, like, they're the ones where you're really rewarded for your projections, like you just said, that foresight almost. And this is where so much flexibility comes in because, like Chris said, a lot of people will consider keeper league a guy that keep a league that lets you keep up to one player. I don't necessarily consider that a keeper league. It's kind of just like, but it is. And you said up to 4. I've seen keeper leagues go up to as far as 6 and 7. And there's lots of different ways to do it. They might say you get to keep your player based on the spot you drafted them that year before. And generally keeper leagues will only let you keep players for a set period of time, maybe like 2 to 3 years. Same thing with dynasty. So there's so many intricate rules inside these. So I would say if you're going to get one of these, just really kind of do your research, and if you're joining someone that's already existed, know all those rules before you get in. Because I've been in before where I thought I had it figured out, and I'm like, yes, I drafted this player because I'm going to keep him in the 4th round, and like, oh, that's not how it works. It bumps up 2 rounds every year. So like if you drafted someone in the 8th round, that's great for the first year. The next year it costs you a 6th round draft pick. The next year it costs you a 4th round draft pick. So there's these kind of progressive keeper and dynasty leagues. To me, if you're listening to this and you're like, I know all this stuff, and you're not in a keeper and dynasty league, get in one right away because you'll never regret it. But again, that's the highest level of commitment. It is the one you have to pay the most attention to, and it takes the most skill. It takes it takes most of the luck out of it outside of the scoring, and really puts the skill in your hands as a manager or an owner of a team. So they are fantastic. And we have never done one at Blazzzin, but I'm thinking to get one this year because I'm sick of us running our mouths every year on our Blazzzin page, and we don't have guys that can show it up every year. So they are by far my favorite.
Yeah, and be on the lookout for a potential of the Blazzzin Sportscast league as well. So we'll work behind the scenes to get that going. So those are really the types. So you've got the more casual daily. You can get a little bit more commitment in the seasonal, and then you've got your long-term. So once you determine that level, what's going to be the best route for you, how much commitment you can provide. And we say commitment, like beyond the draft, where that may be, a half a day out of your time where you do a live draft or an online draft, setting your lineup takes, anywhere, depending upon how in-depth you want to get, between, 5 minutes and maybe there's some people that really dive deep to an hour of your week. So it's not like we say commitment. It's not like you're putting, days worth of time into this all at once. So once you've drafted your teams, it's pretty well to go. So you pick the type of league you want to join, you join it. Now, the other thing that you want to watch out for is the various draft styles and formats. And why this is important is because each draft style may not suit what you're comfortable doing or where you feel knowledgeable enough with players and with statistics and with your ability to kind of forecast what potential players may have. So the 2 options typically that you see, one is called a snake draft, and that's a simple one where you, based on the number of teams that you have in your league, you are randomly assigned a draft order. And if you pick 1, then you have the first pick in the draft. It goes down through 10 or 12, depending upon how many players you have. And then it reverses back up. So it goes 1 through 12 and then 12 through 1. And it does that each round until all of the player slots have been filled. And then the other, which I want you to provide some more detail in because I know this is your favorite, is the auction style draft. And that's where you're actually allocated a certain dollar amount, allowing you to bid on players. What's great about that is everyone has an equal chance at the players. So in a snake draft, once a player's taken off the board, they're gone. So if you had all of your chips in, or you really wanted Christian McCaffrey, you don't have one of the first 2 picks and he's off the board, then the only way you can get that player is to possibly trade for him. Whereas in auction draft, everybody has the same opportunity to get him. So dive a little bit deeper into the auction draft and explain that to the listeners a little bit more.
Well, to your point there, with a snake draft, draft position is everything. And some people actually don't prefer the first spot. I know a lot of people this year, I hear them keep saying, I want the 3rd or the 4th spot. Well, why would you want the 3rd spot? Because they're as comfortable taking, say, Ezekiel Elliott or Dalvin Cook as they are taking Christian McCaffrey this year. And why would I want the 3rd spot? Because on the way back through, I'm going to have 3 picks earlier that first spot did. So draft position in a lot of my leagues that I do, they'll actually do like a drawing, and they'll draw your name, and then whenever your name is drawn, you get to pick what spot you want to draft of. It doesn't necessarily mean you want the first spot. On the Yahoo and stuff, they randomize your draft spot. So like Chris said, if you get the 7th spot, it's one of those things. It's the things I dislike most about a snake draft is that sometimes you have to reach for a guy and overpay for him because, yeah, sure, this the 5th spot, I may be like, I got to take Saquon Barkley here, right? But I really, really want DeAndre Hopkins. I know he's not going to come all the way back to me. So I either have to reach for that guy, which means draft him way above where he really should go, or I have to take a guy maybe I'm not in love with, but if I don't take him here, I'm dumb for not taking a guy this high. Yeah. With an auction, what I love about it is you can base it off whatever dollar amount. Most people do. The standard amount is $200. The one thing you have to know is your roster size, and that's part of being committed to your league, knowing how your starting spots and your roster size, because you have to be able to fill that entire roster with that $200. And then you can pay as much as you want for players. I've seen players go as high as $85 for one spot, meaning that you spend, almost 50% of your budget on one player, where you still have another 16 or 17 guys to draft. So that's really like a really cool way to do it. Like you said, you might, I've seen people commit almost like 85% of their budget to 3 guys, and then they fill the rest with really cheap guys, dollar guys. So what they're saying is I'm going to get 3 first rounders on my team. And then I'm going to take all 16 and 17 rounders for the rest of my guys, and hopefully those 3 guys carry my team. So there's a lot of different approaches in an auction league as far as strategy goes. Where snake draft, it's kind of like single-minded strategy. Take the best player available, or the player you feel the best about at your draft spot. Where auction allows you to kind of flex your strategy a little bit.
Yep, that's good. One of the things I want to interject here too is, as you go through determining what kind of league you want to be in, what draft style you want to be a part of, the one thing with fantasy football that if you haven't been involved in it and don't know it already, there is a multitude of abbreviations that you're going to come across. And so one of the things is, once you've kind of decided what league you want to join and you've joined it and you're getting ready to prepare for a draft, you're going to do some research and you're going to see some abbreviations, and you may not be familiar with what they are. So I want to run through a couple of these. We'll kind of do maybe a little quiz show here and see how good we are at these. So one of the things you're going to see when you're kind of trying to determine your roster or set how you want to go through in your mock drafts is ADP. Mike, what is ADP?
Average draft position, knowing where they're generally drafted at in a normal draft.
Absolutely. And the other way you may see that, and this is less frequent, is EDP, which is estimated draft position. So those are 2 that you're going to do. The other thing with the leagues that you want to make sure, and this is something that you want to be aware of before you even join it, is how the league is actually set up. So the number of rules that can be applied to any given league are pretty vast, from scoring to number of players to how big your roster is to the amount of players you can keep on the bench to how the waiver wire works. I mean, there are really intricate details that you have to be a part of. And so it's important to know ahead of time kind of what you're getting into, so that when you're drafting players, you're drafting the team that makes sense based on the scoring format of the team. So when we're talking about draft, there's going to be things that you're going to come across from a scoring perspective, like PPR. So when we're talking PPR, points per reception, you're going to see things like PRK. This is one that's not as common, but it's position ranking. So when you're looking at your wide receivers, it may say PRK. That's going to be specific to wide receivers and where those players rank. You're going to see things from the previous year like AVG, which is average points per game. How did that person do last year? What were their average points per game? PTS, which is points total season. So last year, how many points did that individual score? So a lot of kind of things going on. I know you commission a lot of leagues, Mike. Expand a little bit about like some of the rules, scoring, things of that, and some of the intricacies that listeners that may want to join should look out for.
Well, the first thing I say, and I tell people this all the time, and it blows my mind that people don't know the rules or the scoring before they draft. For example, if your league is 2 running backs and 3 wide receivers, right, you're obviously going to want to make sure you have enough wide receivers to field 3 every week. If it's only 2 running backs and 2 wide receivers and what they call a flex spot, a basic flex spot means you can either play a running back, a wide receiver, or a tight end in that flex spot. All right. So if it's 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and a regular flex spot, then you're obviously going to want to be more focused on the running back position, at least in my opinion, because running backs tend to go down more. You don't need as many wide receivers to fill out your roster. So again, no, not only like your type of league, but the rosters within the league. Also, there's what they call a super flex. Now, I've never been in one of these, but what a super flex is means you could play a quarterback in that flex spot. The difference in that is most expert fantasy drafters will tell you don't need to take a quarterback early. There's a ton of quarterbacks out there. Wait till like at least the 5th round to take your quarterback. But in a super flex league, quarterbacks are off the board in the first round, especially the top ones, because they score when Chris talked about season points, total season points. Like quarterbacks obviously score the most points in fantasy. So if you can play them in a flex spot, you're going to want to draft a quarterback early so that you have 2 of them. So again, knowing that, then also knowing your scoring. If it's PPR, you're going to want to draft guys earlier that catch the ball a lot, because points per reception means you get a point every time they receive the ball. All right. So running backs who can catch the ball are huge here. And again, if this is like, we already know this stuff for a lot of you guys. Great. We're kind of doing this all as a reference point for people who can check this every year. But points per reception, a guy only has to get 6 catches in a game to make it as equal as scoring a touchdown. There's a lot of guys out there that catch the ball, and there's a lot of good running backs that don't. So going through and knowing that and creating your own draft rankings, so knowing where you want to draft guys, that's huge. You can really take advantage of your draft over guys who don't study the scoring or don't know what they need for their roster. So again, part of we always go back to this commitment, is take 10 minutes, read your league's scoring, and also what the roster starting spots and the roster spots look like. If you don't have a very deep bench, then you're going to want to make sure you have those quality positions locked up, because, you're going to want to make sure if someone's injured or bye weeks, it's something people forget to look at. And I don't believe in like drafting for bye weeks, meaning that, I already have someone on week 10. I can't draft someone else. No, you can draft someone else with the week 10 bye week at that position. Just make sure you have at least one guy there that you're able to play in that, in that absence. So just kind of knowing those things. And then the other thing is, know if your league has an IR spot. Something a lot of leagues are doing is that now, since they changed the IR rules where guys can go out, they don't have to be season ending. They can put someone on and bring them back. They'll allow you to move a guy to your IR spot. He can sit there and he doesn't take up one of your roster spots. So, in the past, when we played, say someone got hurt and they were going to be out 8 weeks, you had to either suck up a whole roster spot and not be able to pick someone else up, or you dropped him and then someone else was able to pick him up that had room on the roster for him. Now, a lot of leagues will give at least 1, even 2 in some cases, IR spots where you can drop them down there, open up a roster spot to pick someone up. Just remember, though, when that guy comes off of IR, you have to move him off that IR spot and then move someone else off your roster. So, again, knowing your league rules, knowing your rosters, knowing your league scoring, those are all part of the commitment to these. And it's really important you understand that before you draft.
All right. So we've got the type of draft that we're going to be involved in. We've dialed it down. We found out the style of draft that we want to get involved in. We know what the points are and how the scoring set up. So now we're actually getting into drafting the players. So, the final piece to the puzzle here, and this is where you're going to get really, really varying and differing ideas from every person you talk to. But I want us to kind of talk through some of maybe the tips and strategies that we use that we have been successful with. I know, I'm sure with the amount of leagues that you've done, you've won your handful of leagues. I've been fortunate enough to win a few myself. And so let's kind of talk through some of the strategies that we use as we begin to draft players. And I'll start with one of the things that you had mentioned is some people are dead set on saying, make sure you pay attention to the bye weeks. You don't want to draft a roster full of players that all have the same bye week. I don't believe in that philosophy. Maybe it's because, I watch my Baltimore Ravens draft all the time and they're, best player available as opposed to drafting for whatever. But for me, it's best player available. So whether I'm doing an auction draft or whether I'm doing a snake draft, I'm not looking at the bye week. I'm going to draft the absolute best team that I can. If that means that I lose 1 week because I've got 6 players on bye, that's fine, because what if I win the other 16 weeks, right? So for me, losing that 1 week is not as important as having a team of really skilled players that are going to allow me the best opportunity to win each week. So for me, I don't look as much into the bye rounds as people.
I don't even look at bye weeks. The only time I ever even notice is if we do, like I said at the beginning, a draft board, a live sticker draft board, they'll put like the bye weeks on there. and then like every now and then I'll glance. Outside of those leagues, I never look at bye weeks because with waivers and pickups, and rather you do a fab budget or whatever, there's trades. There are always options out of it. Or like you said, you can always just sacrifice a week if you have that good of a team. I don't look at bye week because what it will do is stop you from drafting the best player available. So if it's important to you, maybe for the quarterback position, or, your running back situation, you took a flyer on a high risk running back like Saquon Barkley and you're worried about injury, then maybe pay attention to that one position. But outside of that, I believe you're wasting your time looking at bye weeks.
I'm with you. Now, the next is a strategy that, depending upon who you talk to, has sort of changed over the years. Gone are the days where you really have the true one-back performers on a team, where you've got that bell cow that you go to for 3, even 4 downs. If you're in the red zone, that's going to be your carrier. Multitude of teams now are splitting carries between 2 and sometimes even 3 backs. You have running backs that are even more specifically suited to specific skill sets, where you've got your running back that's better at catching out of the backfield. You've got your red zone running back that's just like your bull that's going to charge through the line and get in the end zone. So a lot of people were really heavy on all running backs up front, but now as we start to see these PPR leagues become more prevalent and the go-to, the position of wide receiver has become more valuable in some people's eyes. So how do you differentiate when you're kind of setting your mock draft between what position holds the most value to you? Who are you going for in the first 2 rounds in the draft? And I know a lot of it's based on draft positions. So that's going to play a lot into it.
Yeah, when you're talking about a snake draft as opposed to an auction draft where you can kind of go in with more of a positional strategy, it's just you kind of have to first know what position you're drafting at and then kind of go from there. If you're drafting late and you see a lot of good wide receivers at the end of that first round, beginning of the second round, maybe you go with a 0 running back strategy. And if you do that, the best thing is, so say your first 2 rounds around the snake, you say you draft 11th and you pick a solid wide receiver, you get DeAndre Hopkins there or someone, and then it wraps back around and you get another good wide receiver. It can be scary because running backs are really hard to come by. I would say if you do that, your goal needs to be then is to stack up a lot of mid-tier to low-tier running backs and hope they hit. We see it every year, some of these guys, even guys off the waiver wire. Last year, James Robinson, for example, in 2017, Alvin Kamara was a pickup in most leagues. So, there are guys every year that end up being really good, whether it's based on injuries or guys just didn't expect them to do that well. So you can do that. And that's the same thing. For me, I'm more of a running back heavy up front because there are a lot more wide receivers on a team than there are running backs, and guys tend to pop up. But, so it all depends on what you want and what your strategy needs to be. But I would say just know what you're getting into, because if you look at your draft board, I've seen this with guys before, where they draft 3 wide receivers and a quarterback and they're headed into the 5th round and they still don't have a running back. And they're like, man, there's no running backs left on the board. Who am I going to get? And those guys will end up trading like their 2 of their top 3 picks for one good running back when they could have actually just drafted him. So just pay attention to it as you draft. I would say if you're very serious about your league, try not to drink so much while you're drafting because they tend to be the guys that end up with 3 quarterbacks by the 13th round because, they're like, oh, this is the best player on the board. A lot of times the quarterback may be the high. It depends how you rank your draftable players. If you're going by total season points, those quarterbacks are going to be high up on that list because they score the most. So again, just kind of have a plan going into it, but don't be a slave to your plan. Don't be so committed to your plan, or better yet, don't what they call rankings, bitch. Don't be so worried about rankings that you're like, I got to get this guy. His ADP is 28. I'm drafting at 32 and he's still there. Well, there's probably a reason for that. Now you can take advantage of that, but then if you see that there, we have cell phones. Quick, do your research. Wonder why that guy is still sitting there. And see if it's worth taking advantage of it. So again, part of it when we talk about commitment is if you're going to be in a league, at least do the research prior to the draft and have somewhat of a plan, but don't be so committed to that plan that you don't deter from it, because there are opportunities every draft that people miss out on.
Yeah, good points. The last 2 little bits of advice that I use that I'll throw out there is one, to your point, you don't want to be a slave to your strategy, but you also don't want to abandon it too quickly. So if you start to see a run on a position, don't necessarily be that guy that feels like you've got to change your whole strategy because all of a sudden, 3 wide receivers have been taken off the board right before you and you're afraid you might miss out on one, unless it makes sense. But don't do that. And the second is don't be that guy in the draft that is the homer. And I can be guilty of this because I love my Ravens with all my heart. Don't be that guy that just drafts your entire team. Diversify. Realize that, for me, there's going to be a chance that maybe I have to have like a Najee Harris, on the team that, while I'm going to cheer against them losing the game, I still want him to lose the game, but have, 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. So,
love it. I love it when a guy shows up to the draft in all Steelers gear and I see his number 1 pick is Ben Roethlisberger. I'm like, yes, now we only have 11 guys drafted today. Because you know that means every time he drafts, there's someone else you could have had his first 5 players or Steelers players. It's like, all right, we're good.
Yeah, that's funny. So those are my last 2 bits of advice, and really just have fun with it. I mean, the whole point of this is to have fun. So if you're not enjoying it, and we say this with collecting cards, we say this with everything. If you're not enjoying it, don't do it. Get out of it. Typical, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to, have those moments where, that's part of it. But the goal is to have fun. The goal is to get closer with your friends and your buddies and just have something that you can come back to every year. And it kind of, that's one of the things that we lack, is the bonding. I think, our counterparts, our wives, girlfriends, females, have an easier time doing it, and they go to their brunches and lunches. Guys really don't do it as much as they should. And so this is a great opportunity for at least the next few months to, build those relationships and have a good time doing so. So any last advice from you, Mike?
Well, I do want to real quick before I give my last advice here, touch on what you said about runs, because it's a great point. It is scary sometimes, like say you don't have a quarterback, you decided to be one of those brave guys that waited and you're in the 6th round and you see a run on quarterbacks. It's fine to jump in on the run if it's soon enough. But if you've seen 6 or 7 guys draft before you and you see that they all took quarterbacks, you're like, I got to take one now, but there's really no options left. Don't feel like you have to at that point. If you see the start of a run and there's a guy you want, go ahead and get him, but don't get caught at the end of a run and overpay for a guy. Also, if you're really serious about it, and we could get into an episode where we do like the really important things to look at, like this kind of advanced tips per se, but know the other team's drafting rosters. If everyone has a quarterback already and you don't, or almost like 10 guys do and you don't feel like you need to jump on one, because most guys won't draft their second quarterback till a lot later. So you can kind of take advantage of that knowledge in a way too. So just during a draft, knowing your other team's current rosters helps a lot too. But yeah, I would say for those of guys that it's trouble to get away, like Chris said, from your family, do what I do and stack them all up in 2 weeks and then just disappear for 2 weeks and then just make up for it. Beg for forgiveness, don't ask for permission. Because I'll tell you what, that 2 weeks every year where I do like 8 drafts and 5 or 6 of them are live, there is no better time. A lot of them I do with my brother. It's our time to bond together and go to these drafts together and probably drink a little too much for fantasy drafts. But yeah, enjoy it, because man, I'll tell you what, that group of friends you'll get in a live draft specifically, or even in an online draft, I have a few of them with our guys from Blazzzin now. You just get a different level of connection with them from fantasy football, and a lot of trash talking too, which is always fun. So yeah, man, if you have any questions for us, always drop us a line. You can comment in, the comment sections of wherever we post this, or message us directly. We'd love to answer more questions as a follow-up on the next episode. Chris, anything else to add to that?
Yeah, no, I'd just say, the strategy, and we've been talking obviously because football season is in full swing, but, use this same strategy and you're going to find the same things, whether it be basketball, hockey, golf, everything has a fantasy at this point. So these, tips and strategies and things can work across the board for all of them. So, just kind of use it. Again, this was sort of just a 101 for those that, may not have really gotten invested into fantasy and have been thinking about it. There's going to be those of you that are listening that, this is, old news for you. And that's where we'd like, throw out your tips, anything that you have that we missed, or strategies that you have that are really successful, throw it on our Instagram page at Blazzzin Sportscast, on the Facebook page at Blazzzin Sportscast. Let us know what your thoughts are. But, good luck. If I'm playing against you, I hope you get second place, and, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you guys for listening. And again, Fantasy 101. We'll be back next week with a more of a card episode, I would imagine, Chris.
Yeah, back to basics next week. We're going to have some sports news, get into some cards, got some great releases coming up. In fact, I think later on today, you're going to be ripping some highly anticipated football product.
Immaculate Collegiate comes out today. That's where I'm headed right now to go pick that up. So
perfect. Well, thank you guys. As always, we appreciate you listening. Let us know your thoughts. Download it on Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your streaming podcasts. We're going to be there. Look forward to talking to you next week. Have a great weekend.
See you all.